So in looking at environmental quality, talked about open space and rural prime agricultural land in the opening. But one of the things that we're able to do is to use these models to predict where we're most likely to infringe on these assets that we've come to cherish across our region. That first map was a look at the development pattern in 2020. Those were the parcels that were developed in 2020. And this map is showing you the parcels, the independent properties, the individual properties across our region that are expected to be affected by growth out to the year 2045. So some of these are large tracts of lands that may only be forecasted to receive one or two homes or businesses, but I think the story that we take from this map is that really no place in Middle Tennessee is spared from the potential for development. And more importantly, is our ability to understand how that potential for development may encroach upon the environmentally sensitive areas that we're trying to protect. This is a look at those areas across Middle Tennessee. This is a look at present day development encroachment upon those areas in red. And then these are the environmentally sensitive areas in red that are expected to be in close proximity to growth and development into the future. And so the point here isn't that we should close the door and turn off the lights to growth, but that we need to be more prepared than ever before to begin to understand how to mitigate some of the unintended consequences of rapid growth and development across our landscape. And we can easily be sort of cynical about these future forecasts, but just looking in the last 5 years across our 14-county area, we've lost 660,000 football fields each year, but we've gained 660,000 football fields each year in impervious surface cover. We've lost 575,000 football fields each year in tree canopy, and we've lost 150,000 football fields each year in cropland. And those of you who are involved with Cumberland Region tomorrow would know this because you conducted a study back in 2018 that placed economic value of our agricultural and open space for the region at $16 billion in terms of its economic impact, both directly and indirectly. And it's also important to note that Tennessee as a state is the fourth most threatened in terms of its prime agricultural land. And out to the year 2045, more than a third of the state's prime ag land to be converted is expected to be converted here in Middle Tennessee. Talk about transportation, the implications of growth on transportation. When we do transportation planning for the Nashville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's Transportation Policy Board, that's a mouthful, we zoom into the 7 counties to include Davidson County and the adjacent counties for transportation planning purposes. And you can see our growth forecast. This is population and employment density out through the year 2045. We can translate this into the impact on our area roadways and forecast traffic volumes and traffic speeds to calculate traffic congestion on the roadways out to the year 2045. We're noticing our congestion not only getting more severe on the routes that are already congested, but more widespread. So if today your main way to deal with congestion is to take an alternate route, in the future those alternate routes may be equally congested to the route you're trying to avoid today. One of the reasons for the high degree of congestion in our region, beyond just the sheer volume of related to growth and development, is the sort of higher than average nationally cross-county commuting that our region experiences. So the next couple of maps are going to show you the relationship between where people live and where they work. 1 in 3 Middle Tennesseans work in a different county than they live. And outside of Davidson County, it approaches 1 in 2, right? And so this is a map showing you where daily commuters into the Nashville Central Business District are commuting from. If you commute from Franklin to downtown Nashville today, by the year 2045 or more, that will increase by 26%, or get 26% worse. Right? This is a map showing those who commute into the Franklin Cool Springs area, and if you're a reverse commuter from Nashville, you can expect that commute to get 44% worse by the year 2045. And this is a map of those who commute from Murfreesboro, and there's a large degree, an increasing degree of commuters between Murfreesboro and Cool Springs and Franklin. And if you commute from Murfreesboro to Cool Springs, you can expect an 81% increase. 81% worse traffic is a better way of saying that. All right, you know, when we think about transportation, it's most obvious to think about traffic congestion, but more and more we don't talk about transportation without acknowledging an elephant in the room, which is that in the 5 years that preceded the adoption of our most recent transportation plan, we saw a 76% increase in pedestrian fatalities across our region. That's in large part because a lot more people are walking and biking across our region, but our infrastructure wasn't built to provide safe passage to those individuals. So we're seeing increases in traffic volumes, increases in pedestrian and cyclists, but very little to be done to mitigate sort of the conflict that just naturally arises between them. And then when we think about traffic safety as a whole, you know, Tennessee is 47% higher than the national average traffic fatalities per capita. And it might surprise you to know that there are 7 states that are larger, in some cases much larger than us, that have fewer overall traffic fatalities. Massachusetts, New Jersey, Arizona, Washington, Virginia, Michigan, New York State all experience fewer absolute total number of traffic fatalities each year than Tennessee. Solid waste. I talked a little bit about solid waste. I'll hit on this briefly. We're in Murfreesboro, a community that is no stranger to the issue of solid waste as we confront the issues with Middle Point reaching the end of its lifespan. You know, one of the things that we see in trends and national benchmarks is that Middle Tennesseans on average generate 40% more daily household waste than the average Americans. While at the same time, we're ranked 48th in the country for recycling. We have about a 5% recycling rate. And if you were the 41st state, you would have more than double the recycling rate. So 11% recycling rate for the 41st ranked state. The top 15 states in America in terms of recycling recycle more than 25% of their recyclable materials. And the top 5 states recycle more than 45% of that material. Our mayors have increasingly been discussing with each other what to do about solid waste. Solid waste, just like transportation, is a regional issue as we all send our household waste, municipal solid waste, MSW, to 92% of our waste goes to one of 5 landfills across Middle Tennessee. The vast majority of that going to Middle Point here in Murfreesboro. And that landfill, as of 2022, which is 2021 data, had 6 years of life left, which is why the consideration for its expansion was on the table. We know how that turned out, and what will happen once Middle Point closes is that it will accelerate the end of life for the remaining landfills in our region. Experts think we have a combined lifespan of about 8 years on our landfills in Middle Tennessee, with no real public policy for what we're going to do when those shut down. Obviously, the long-term objective is to divert as much as possible from landfills, but what are we going to do in the meantime without drastically increasing the cost or shocking the system for Middle Tennesseans? So how is our region responding? On the issue of open space, you know, we've had some wins recently. In 2018, the city of Hendersonville, a neighborhood grassroots effort through a nonprofit and TDEC partnered together to conserve and enhance 35 acres of Beatty Farm. Mayor Brown and the city of Gallatin purchased 70 acres in their community to preserve public green space until the end of time. Williamson County was a leader ahead of many other counties in our region that are now following suit and rethinking their local land use policy and zoning ordinances to make sure that we were protecting the rural countryside and not allowing it to turn into endless degrees of subdivisions that are built in areas without the appropriate infrastructure. So we've had wins at the local level. We've also had significant effort by organizations, both public and private, to prioritize our landscape for conservation. And so we're getting a clearer picture of what those sacred cows are. And many resource agencies and communities and private landowners are taking action to purchase or land bank that land for future generations. On the transportation front, in 2021, the area mayors who serve on the Nashville Area NPO Transportation Policy Board adopted a $10.5 billion 25-year plan that anticipates all the federal funds that we expect to get out of Congress over the next 25 years and allocates that money to specific projects across Middle Tennessee. This is available in an interactive map and database online if you're interested in knowing what our priorities for investment are with those funds. But one of the things that we continue to be confronted with is the fact that that plan, as much as $10.5 billion sounds like a lot of money, the equivalent plans for Austin, Atlanta, and Denver show that we're being out-invested when it comes to transportation by a tune of 2 to 1 compared to the Austin region, 3 to 1 compared to Atlanta, and 6 to 1 compared to Denver. And the missing ingredient in these financial plans doesn't tend to be the federal formula funds that flow to communities based on population and other metrics. It tends to be the local skin in the game. It's the local dedicated funding to support transportation that really elevates your opportunities to solve the problem. That local skin in the game also taps into additional federal funds that are held in DC for competition. It's difficult to compete for those discretionary dollars if you don't have local skin in the game and can ensure that you can operate and maintain the system that you're building with those capital dollars. Another thing that we're confronted with is that even with the implementation of our 25-year plan, this is not the most popular slide to show, but we're actually going to make congestion worse. Right, the idea of induced demand. So much of our investment is going into expanding the roadway system, which induces demand. So the overall performance of our traveling and congestion will actually get 12% worse than it was otherwise projected to be in the year 2045. And that isn't meant to undermine the investments that we're making. Those investments are being made for good reason. But the idea is that if you continue to expand highways, it's gonna solve some of your objectives, but it will still induce demand. Y'all are familiar with why did that road that was planned for the last 20 years open at congestion? Because the supply is there and it's going to be used. And so one of the things that we're beginning to realize is that we have to diversify the choices that people had to get around so they're not held hostage by the congestion that is inevitable for a growing and successful regional economy. Solid waste. I mentioned this is an issue of concern for area mayors. More than 70% have told us as staff that they're willing to sit down and talk about opportunities for regional collaboration to include the potential for a regional solid waste authority to provide for cooperative purchasing and regional policy making and shared investment into that infrastructure that we all will ultimately use over time. Back in 2017-18, we adopted the region's first master plan for solid waste that sort of a three-legged stool here to improve the consumer experience, to find strategies to reduce, reuse, and recycle, and to think about solid waste and the truly integrated system that it is across Middle Tennessee. The GNRC board last year, about a year and a half ago, created a strike force of public and private sector leaders to begin to work together to confront this issue. I know there's a lot of activity in the legislature now as well, attention from the General Assembly to offer some assistance for Middle Tennessee, which is really just an indicator of what's to come for the rest of the state. So how can you get involved? One, you can volunteer with the Greater Nashville Regional Council, gnrc.org/volunteers. You would be surprised about the opportunities that are made available to give back to your community in Middle Tennessee as a whole. You can get involved in Cumberland Region Tomorrow, which is a great opportunity for members of the public and the private sector to collaborate with each other to influence public policies that ultimately shape growth and development patterns. You can also, if you live in Rutherford County, get engaged in Plan Rutherford. There's a booth out in the hall that is being staffed by Doug DeMasi, the Rutherford County Planning Director, to allow you to help shape the future of Rutherford County through its comprehensive planning process that will yield a plan that would be presented to the Planning Commission for consideration a little bit later this year. And then finally, I guess I'll just leave you, with the thought that I think it's really important, and so do you all in this room, to always be thinking regionally while we're acting locally to solve these challenges. And then the real question is, how can we work together to ensure that that inevitability of change is used to improve quality of life? And I think the only way to do that, the only way to not leave change to chance, is to work together to proactively manage the growth and development that we expect to come our way over the next 20 to 25 years. So with that, David, I will turn it back to you.